Hi there, and welcome to a Studio Calico video with me, Lisa Spangler. Today I'm going to be sharing a fun inking technique, and I'm going to be using this fall plant set by Jasmine Jones and the floral thank you set from One Little Birds. And for this technique, we're going to be mixing and matching pigment inks and dye inks. So I went ahead and grabbed a bunch of colors that all go together. These are all kind of warm colors. And I grabbed the same color in both pigment and dye inks. So as you can see, I have the flamingo in pigment and dye, and the lemon zest also in the pigment and the dye. And to get started, I went ahead and stamped the thanks ever so much on my base card. And then I have here two of the flower stamps from that fall plant set by Jasmine Jones. And I'm going to be stamping all over the front of the card. And so that I keep a nice crisp edge along the fold, I'm going to take some Post-it notes and I'm just going to cover up the edge. That way I can stamp the flowers right over top of the edge and have them bleed off the side of the card. So I'm just putting on some Post-it notes right here, and I'm going to be working on a piece of scrap paper once again so that I can stamp off the edge of the card and not get the ink all over my desk. So just putting on the Post-it notes. And then I thought I'd show you this trick I have with dye inks. You probably already know about this, but you can stamp the same stamp twice without re-inking, and then you'll get a lighter color of ink. So here it is stamped to solid again, just so that you can see all the differences there. And then here is the pigment just for comparison. And you can see that the pigment ink is a little bit different color because it's more opaque, so none of the white of the paper will show through. So I'm going to start just kind of randomly stamping. I always seem to start in the upper left corner there. I don't know why. And I tend to stamp in groups of 3. So here I am stamping 3 flowers with that flamingo ink. And I'm trying to decide where to put this one, maybe up there. And now I'm going to go ahead and clean off my stamp, and I'm going to switch to using the flamingo dye-based ink. So that's this one here. And one tip for you when using dye-based inks to get a more solid impression is to ink it up really good and stamp it on scratch paper, and then ink it up really good again, and then stamp it on your project. And I found that this just gives more even coverage, just like that. Now I'm going to stamp it again, but this time I'm going to stamp it off so it will remove some of the ink. So now when I stamp it on the card, I get a lighter color of that same flamingo ink. Isn't that cool? So I'm going to put another one over here. And now I'm going to go ahead and clean off that stamp and switch to using the lemon zest dye-based ink. This is such a pretty color. It's one of my favorite yellows. It's just so vibrant and bright. So this time I'm going to overlap the lemon zest flowers with the flamingo flowers that I've already stamped. And I'm going to go ahead and speed this up. I love watching these in fast forward motion. I think it's just so funny. And I thought you might like to see my process and how I try to figure out where I'm going to stamp a flower and like what color I'm going to stamp it in and everything. But I didn't figure you'd want to watch it in real time where it was really super slow. So as you can see, I switched and I put some Blush Crush ink and flowers in there. And then I went back to the flamingo and stamped some more of those as well. So now the background solid flowers are all finished, and I'll show you a close-up of this at the end. But for my next step, I'm going to stamp that outline flower in black ink. And I really like this VersaFine black ink because it keeps all the little details in there. And I'm not going to stamp very many of these, and I'm not going to stamp them exactly on top of the solid flowers as you'd expect. So I'm going to start with this one because I wanted a black one down there close to the sentiment that says thanks ever so much. And as you can see, I really offset it, so that way it looked like it was intentional that it was offset. And as I'm stamping these outline flowers, I'm trying to make sure that I rotate the stamp so that they're all not facing the same direction. And now I'll go ahead and speed this up again. So that's all finished, and now it's time for the big reveal, and that's removing those post-it notes from the side. And look at that nice clean finished edge that you get by having the post-it notes there. And then hopefully you can see how the inks look all different. Here, I'll zoom in on this photo so that hopefully you can see it better. And what I really love about mixing and matching pigment and dye inks like this, especially when they're the same color, is how the pigment ink will block out the dye ink, so you pretty much get the full effect of whatever color the pigment ink is. And yet with the dye ink, where they overlap, it kind of makes a new color, like how you get the orange with the pink and the yellow. And if you know me, you know I can't stop at just making one card. So while I had my supplies out, I got the fern stamp from that fall plant set, and I used the same technique where I mixed and matched pigment and dye inks. And this time it's more of a subtle effect since the fern is so lacy and delicate, but I still think it's really super pretty. And I love how you get the interaction between the opaque pigment ink and then the translucent dye ink. So thanks so much for joining me today, and let me know if you have any questions over on the Studio Calico blog.